Okay, so we really value finishing at 11:30. I'm going to do my very best to leave enough time for our stable announcement at the end, but it might be 11:35. So when it turns 11:30, don't be checking your watches. Just know 11:35 is probably the more realistic finish time. Could have saved a few minutes without giving you that little debrief, but hey, that's okay. We're in part 5 today of our series, You Are Not the Boss of Me. And what we're doing in this series is we're learning to say no to the emotions that compete for the control in our life. Emotions are part of human beings. They're not bad. But when we allow our emotions to get the best of us, when we allow them to be the center of our life, then all of a sudden we're knocked off balance. We are not living our lives with purpose. We're not going, keeping our true north, and we're just sort of wandering with the wind. On top of that, people are probably walking on eggshells around us because we're a bit unstable at those times. So we're not learning to get rid of emotions, but it's like a how-to series, how to not let the emotions get the best of us in our lives. So far we've talked about a few different things. We've talked about guilt, that we don't want guilt to be the boss of us. We've talked about envy, the comparison trap, jealousy, that so many of us can fall into. It's a human instinct to compare ourselves to other people, but we don't want that to be the case in our lives, and we don't want that to be the boss of us. So we learn to say no to envy. And last week we talked about anger, that anger will not be the boss of us. And today I want to talk about something that Jesus focuses on a lot in his ministry. In fact, if you read the Bible, you'll hear these words quite often. We're going to talk about fear. I just want to be transparent. Fear, sometimes in my life, can be the boss of me. That this is a specific emotion that I really have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm not up here saying that I've got everything figured out. And so the message that I'm giving, it applies to me as well. But today we're going to talk about fear. Because none of us want fear to be the boss of us, do we? It's not a fun thing to have fear dictate our actions, to have fear dictate our relationships. For some of us, fear is not something that we struggle with. In fact, maybe people around you think, hey, you need a little bit more fear in your life, right? You're making decisions that you are not worried about the consequences in the future, so why don't you just get a little bit more fear in your life? But for others of us, this is a really real thing. That there is an element of fear that creeps into our lives daily. And fear, what does it do? It robs us of certain opportunities. It interferes in our relationships. It interferes in our marriages, in our parenting. And more, it keeps us up at night. It genuinely makes you tired. Nobody likes going to bed knowing you have to wake up at 4:30 to go to work or go to the gym or just to get up before your kids, whatever it is. And you're laying in bed and your wheels are turning and you're worrying and you're fearful and you just can't go to sleep. And so that sort of throws us out of whack for the next day. It interferes in so many areas of our lives. And the interesting thing about fear, fear isn't all bad. There is a healthiness to some fear in our life. Fear is a byproduct. And it's a byproduct of something that we shouldn't want to get rid of. It's something that is really important that none of us should want to give it up. Right? This part of fear is good. It's a byproduct of our ability to accumulate knowledge and project into the future. It's one of God's greatest gifts that we have, that He's given us. The ability that enables us to imagine, the ability that enables us to hope and to dream and to hope for. And without this ability, we wouldn't be able to say things like, I just can't wait. I can't wait for Christmas. I can't wait for the rain to come or for this heat to die down. Speaking of heat, air conditioning is working. I just think it's so hot outside that it's creeping in through the windows. But it limits, without it, we wouldn't be able to hope or look forward to certain things in our life. And our ability to imagine has so much more upside to it than it does downside. But it also creates the potential for fear in our life. It creates an endless question of the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? If I do that, what are the consequences of this? It creates a bunch of those what if questions. But fear sometimes is a good thing. So I don't recommend this way of parenting, but sometimes we use it in our parenting, don't we? Where nothing wasn't working for the kid, and so an element of, you bring an element of fear in the situation, but we don't want fear to be the boss of us. You don't want fear to be the boss of you. I don't want it to be the boss of me, because it pulls us out of balance. It makes us distracted, and it makes us overly protective. Fear causes us to become so self-aware. It's all about us, it's all about me, and I don't want to, I'm going to lose my concern for those around me, because I'm more concerned for me. And Jesus said so much about fear. He said so much about fear that it's actually a little bit naive, the things that Jesus talked about. In isolation, if you just look at Jesus talking in isolation, then it might seem naive. And how the Bible is presented to us, sometimes we do this, and it's not the best way to look at our Bible. We read a chapter of a book within a bigger book, within a collection of books in the Bible, and we have like a once upon a time and an ending. Like that chapter is a once upon a time and an ending, and we forget about the context that it's in. We forget about how it's connected to actually a verse before, and so we read things in isolation. And if you read Jesus' advice when it comes to fear and isolation, it seems completely naive, because, the bottom line of what Jesus would teach is fear not. Okay, he's like, stop it. Just don't have fear. And that's not very helpful, is it? If we just thought we could get rid of fear like that, we would do it. We wouldn't have fear in our lives. And so the bottom line of what Jesus is speaking, though, is just fear not. In other words, how we're sort of putting these words, not to put words in Jesus' mouth, but don't let the fear be the boss of you. Fear not. Don't let it be the boss of you. And it's easy for us to say that. It's easy for us to say, I'm not going to be afraid of things, guys. This is like honest. I still am fearful of the dark sometimes. I'm still fearful of spiders. There are many things in my life that I think I could get better in, but he's saying fear not, which is easy to say, but it's virtually impossible to do. And it was hard for Jesus' first century followers to do as well. They felt the same way. And so after Jesus chose his 12 disciples, he told them, I'm sending you out like a sheep among wolves. And for us, that might just be a figure of speech, but for them, they knew exactly what that meant. If you send sheep among a pack of wolves, that sheep is not going to end well. There will be nothing left of that sheep except for some bones and some stench and some evidence that there was a bad situation here, right? And so he's saying, guys, I'm going to send you out like sheep among wolves. You'll be arrested. You'll be beaten. And throughout these disciples' lives, towards the end of their lives, because of what they believed and what they proclaimed, a lot of them were arrested. A lot of them were beaten. Some of them were killed. So he says, I'm going to send you out like a sheep among wolves. But guys, don't be afraid. Excuse me, Jesus, you just told us that you're going to send us out among sheep among wolves, and you're saying don't be afraid? Those two things don't really go together. I am afraid. And that didn't make any sense. And it didn't work. The disciples were afraid. They weren't, Jesus said don't be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. No, they were afraid. So what did he do? He took them on a field trip. And I'm going to read this field trip to you, and this is where that isolation part comes into it, because many of you are going to recognize the field trip, but you didn't understand necessarily the context of what the field trip was about. You looked at it as an isolated event, and maybe we got the outcome of what that story was not necessarily correct. And so he takes them on this field trip, and it's about fear. And this is what Matthew describes. The four Gospels in the Bible are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're all about the life of Jesus. And they are eyewitnesses to the life of Jesus. And Matthew documented this. He said that he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. And many of you know where this is going, but let's have fresh eyes and fresh ears as we read this. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Why? Because they were his followers. They did what Jesus did. They went where Jesus went. They were like his apprentices. They wanted to learn what it meant to be a Jesus follower, so they did everything that Jesus did. And then Matthew tells us that suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake. This isn't hyperbole. These people understand what a normal storm would be, and Matthew is telling us this was no normal storm. I've lived here for a long time and I hadn't seen anything like this before. A furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves, they swept over the boat. And these boats, they weren't big boats. They were probably quite small boats. And I don't want us to picture this like we're in Sunday school. Let's have a reality of what this situation is looking like. They're in the middle of the sea. There's so much cloud coverage that they probably can't see the shores. It is pelting down with rain. Waves are coming over the boat. Maybe they're getting motion sickness because they don't like, I don't know. Most of them are fishermen, so they probably were used to it. But it was windy, and if you've ever been on a boat in a storm, it's not a quiet thing. It is loud. Maybe the boat is creaking, and it's just an intense, it's not bright out because the clouds are covering the sun, so it's quite dark. And the rain is coming in sideways. They're all saturated. Their hair is like stuck to their face. Their beard is just dripping with water. And I mean, it is not a fun scene. They don't look good. They don't look pretty. Things are not looking good for these people. And then Matthew says, and Peter confirmed this through Mark. So your book of Mark is most likely Peter telling Mark what to write, because it's believed that Peter was illiterate. So he would tell people what to write. And so that's where the book of Mark comes in. It's really Peter's perspective. And so he confirms this later. But Matthew says this: throughout that furious storm, Jesus was sleeping. Sound asleep. Throughout the rain, throughout the wind, throughout the boat creaking, throughout probably the disciples screaming because they're petrified of what's happening, he's just having a nice nap. You guys know people like that in your life that can just sleep through anything? My wife's one of those. And it's good and it's bad at the same time. So she just slept. Jesus was just sleeping, which is impossible in this situation. It's pouring with rain. Waves are smashing onto the boat. The boat is rocking. It's loud. Jesus was sleeping. And so the disciples went and woke him up. Not like you'd go wake up your kids and say, hey, no, like, imagine what's happening here. They're like, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. We're going to die. Maybe they're like shaking him by his shoulders because their adrenaline is raging and they're fearful of their life. And when we're fearful of our lives, we probably don't whisper. So they're like, Lord, save us. You're the Son of God. Wake us up. Wake up. He replied. So maybe he like gets up and just leans up a little bit and says, you have little faith. Why are you so afraid? We're afraid because we're about to die. That's why we're afraid, Jesus. We're afraid because I've never seen a storm like this and we're out on a boat. We don't even know which way to go. We can't even get back to shore. I don't think I can swim that far. We might drown. Jesus, that's why we are afraid. When you're about to drown, you'll probably be afraid. Now, this is not a story, a miracle story about how Jesus had power over nature. That's not the point of this story. That's not the point of what Jesus is doing here. He is teaching them about fear. He's teaching them about fear. So he got up and he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. Got up in the middle of the storm while everyone was panicking. He rebuked the waves, he rebuked the wind, everything was completely calm. Jesus didn't panic. Your Heavenly Father doesn't panic. Your Savior doesn't panic. Isn't that good to know? That no matter what season of life you're going through right now, no matter how hard and challenging, and I know, church, that some of you are going through some challenging times in your life, and then we start to panic. Isn't it good to know that God says, it's okay. I got you. I've got this. Now, when we start to follow Jesus, the promise isn't that our life is going to go perfectly planned. The promise isn't that we're going to get everything we want, that there's going to be no hardships in our life. But when we get into the storms, the promise is that Jesus will get us through those storms in our life. Might not be how you think it would be. It's not that everything's going to be roses, but that when we're in the middle of the storm and we don't see a way out, that Jesus will get us through that storm. God didn't panic. We panic because we project into the future based on what we know, based on what we've seen, and based on what we we have experienced. But God, who created the heavens and the earth, who created time, did not panic. He doesn't panic. And perhaps this is what Jesus wanted the people on the boat to know. Perhaps this is what he wanted you and for me to see. The men were amazed. You would be too. And they asked, what kind of man is this? That's such an important question. Who is this man we're in the presence of right now? Who is Jesus? If you've left the faith because you got hung up on something in the Bible that isn't, what kind of man is this? I am afraid that you might have left for the wrong reason. If you're questioning your faith based off something that is not, who is Jesus? This is the anchor of our faith. Who is Jesus? It's a question that we all have to answer at some point of our life. What kind of a man is this, they wondered. Even the winds and the waves, they obey him. And when Peter told Mark this story, he described their fear. This is what he says. They feared a great fear. They feared a great fear. They had 2 moments of fear on this boat encounter. Their latter fear was greater than their former fear. Their fear of whose presence that they were in was greater than the fear of the storm. Yes, they were physically feared for their life, but then after, they realized what this man that had authority over the storm. They're like, holy, whose presence are we in? For a fleeting moment, just a quick moment, their confidence in Jesus has overwhelmed their fear. Just for a moment. It didn't last long. It wasn't like the rest of their lives that fear didn't trickle into their lives. But for that moment, their confidence in who Jesus was overwhelmed their fear. Just for a moment. What Jesus was teaching them was this. You don't have to let fear be the boss of you. You don't have to let fear overwhelm you, because there is something more overwhelming in your presence. You don't have to let fear be the boss of you. Then, while it was still fresh in their minds, while this experience on the boat was still fresh in their minds, Jesus underscored their experience with an illustration from nature. He says, do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Don't be afraid of the things that might be harmful on this earth. Do not be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Jesus was saying, don't you remember the boat ride, guys? Don't you remember the boat ride? You are afraid of the wrong thing. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Which for us, I don't know. But that would have made sense to them. Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. So God cares for nature, yes, but more so. And even the very hairs on your head are all numbered. Again, don't be afraid. You are worth way more than those sparrows. Those sparrows that aren't worth much, God's looking out for those sparrows, but you have no idea how much more God cares for you, and He is looking out for you. God knows what you're going through. He knows what you're going through. God is a personal God, a personal Father. He cares. Even when bad things happen, we can trust Him. So the disciples were finally getting it. So He signed them up for another field trip. He goes and He does this thing where He feeds the 5,000. Right? So He's gone and He's preaching for way too long. I mean, that's where we get it from. He's got this really long message, and the disciples go, Jesus, I think people are getting hungry. Which I think they're going, Jesus, I'm hungry. And so He's like, that's all right, we can feed them. So He goes and He says, hey, go find some food. And only one boy brought some food. Where was everyone else's food? Only one boy's mama thought it was right to pack their kids some food as they were going out. Anyhow, so there was just a little bit of food, and Jesus said, right, let's go feed them. And they're looking at the fish and the loaves and like, we don't have enough. And so, miraculously, Jesus multiplies the food and feeds the 5,000, and their confidence is at an all-time high. They're like, we were a part of this amazing miracle. Our names are going to be remembered in history based on what Jesus did just now. Their confidence was at such a high. And then, after that, immediately after that, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. So he didn't let them stay around and boast in their glory based on what Jesus had just done. Again, there was crowds everywhere. Jesus gets them into the boat. And the Greek word for made is more like he forced them into the boat. Why did he have to force them? They were probably thinking, we're not getting on a boat with you again, Jesus. We remember what happened last time. We've been on many boats, but nothing was like the last time where we almost died. So immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. So he made them get in. He pushes them off the beach across the sea. And hours later, they're at a standstill. They're rowing and they're rowing against the wind. So it's hard, it's tiring, they're young and strong, but they're rowing against the wind, so they can't go anywhere. And shortly before dawn, Jesus went up to them, walking on the lake. And I know how that sounds. If you are not a Jesus follower, maybe you're watching online, or this is your first time in church for a long time, you're like, you expect me to believe that Jesus walked on. Christians believe that because the Bible tells us so, I'm meant to believe that Jesus walked on water. And to that, I would say, no. It's way better than that. We Christians don't believe because the Bible tells us so. We believe this happened because Matthew was an eyewitness. He was there. Peter documented this to Mark. He documented this. He was there. John, who was with Jesus through his whole ministry, documented. I mean, we don't believe because the Bible tells us so. We believe because Matthew, Mark, and John all record this story, and they were eyewitnesses. They were there, and more than that. What they did not do is they did not say, yeah, we totally knew it was Jesus, totally confident that he was walking on water. I knew the whole time. No. They did not write themselves as the hero in the story. They wrote embarrassing facts about themselves. Like when you make up a story, you don't write yourself in as somebody that is petrified and terrified and screaming, and you don't write those things about yourself because you want to write yourself in as somebody that is confident and knew exactly what was going on. And so people call this the criteria of embarrassment. That when you are looking at something, if it's historically accurate, they look at the criteria of embarrassment. It's used to determine the authenticity of a historical account. If something is embarrassing to a person of importance, the assumption is an author would not have invented the incidents. So, when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost! They cried. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. So when they saw Jesus walking to them, they didn't go, yeah, I knew it was Jesus. No, they wrote this in that it's a ghost. It's a ghost, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. As long as I am here, there's no need to follow your fear. You can follow me, even when there's something that you're afraid of. Take courage. It is I. I am here. But again, it didn't stick. It didn't stick. They feared right up to the end of their life. They feared right up to the end of Jesus' ministry. At the end, Jesus announced to them. So he gathered them all together. They're having this last time together, and he announced to them a new covenant. That Jesus had come to introduce something brand new. The old was fulfilled, and there is something new that is coming. A new movement, that this thing is going to spread like a wildfire, and it's going to be amazing. Nothing will stop this movement. And he sort of took the role of Moses, because up until this moment, nobody except for Moses would give a command, and he introduced a new command. And this is exactly what they've been waiting for. They'd been waiting for the Son of God, the one that had been crucified. I think I said that word wrong. They thought that he was about to proclaim himself as king and Messiah. They lived in an occupied nation, like, finally we're going to get our land back. And so they were like, fine, he is here, this is the one. And then later that night, Jesus gets arrested. He gets arrested and the disciples panicked. They were fearful, they were afraid, they worried, and they hid, and they lied, and they denied, and they watched Jesus get crucified. And afterward, they felt that everything that Jesus had done, everything that Jesus had taught, had just been canceled out. That it's not true. So they jumped off board. They said, clearly this isn't the Son of God. Clearly this isn't the one that that was promised to us. Clearly we have been wrong and we've been following someone for 3 years for no point. We'll never get those 3 years back. However, 3 days later, they peered into an empty tomb. Later on, they saw their resurrected friend, and it clicked. It clicked. Everything made sense. And then they were back in business. Right? They were back in business. Because, get this, Jesus' resurrection put a punctuation, an exclamation mark on everything that he said, everything that he taught, and everything that he did. Because this new movement, this new covenant, he was at the center of it. And so if he was no longer there, and then it just didn't make sense. But Jesus, the resurrection was an exclamation mark on everything that he had said about himself. Things made no sense before now. Things made no sense before, but now everything makes perfect sense. Especially what he said about fear. You see, for us, the resurrection is predominantly talked about around Easter time. But for the disciples, for the first century followers, it was everything. It was their source of strength. It was their source of boldness, of courage. Jesus' resurrection validated the claims he made about himself. It proved that he could be trusted. The world was still a scary place, but they no longer needed to be afraid. They no longer needed to fear. They feared not. So they came out of hiding. They faced down the very men who had Jesus arrested, who flogged him and crucified him. Then they went out to change the world. They changed the world. Why? Because fear not changes the world. Fear not changed the world. They had more confidence in who Jesus was than the fear or the worry that they could have on this earth. They had lost their fear of death. And later in the 2nd century, Roman medical writer Claudius Galenus examined the bodies of Christians as they died from their injuries in the Roman arena. And you just weren't allowed to do this, but here's what he said about them. For fearlessness of death and the hereafter is something we witness in them every day. Fear is a permanent part of the human experience. There are lots of ways to cope. Lots of ways to cope, and none of us want it to be the boss of us. And Peter, get this, Peter, who failed both boat rides, right? Peter, who was afraid of both boat rides, he failed both field trips, panicked during Jesus' arrest, lied about knowing who Jesus was. He wrote to people like us, who believe but do not see. This is what Peter says. He says, cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. Cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. This literally means to transfer all your worry onto him, all your fear, all your anxiousness. Cast all your cares onto him. He cares for you. Peter should know. Peter should know because he faced things that we could just not imagine. He was executed in Nero's Rome. He was confident that the promise Jesus extended to him was available to us. He believed that we could say with him and the psalmist, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, whatever season I'm in, though I go through the darkest seasons of my life, fear, you are not the boss of me. I will not let worry, I will not let fear become the boss of me because of who Jesus is and because of what Jesus did. I already have a boss of me. He conquered life. He conquered death. He is who he claimed to be. He's worthy of my worship. He's worthy of all of our trust. The life of Jesus is an invitation and a promise. It's an invitation to follow and to fear not, even when there's something to be afraid of. He says to us, I am with you. I see you, and I care for you. Fear, you are not the boss. God, we thank you for Jesus. That he can come in and calm the storm. God, whatever storm we feel like we're going through right now, we want to just say that we trust you, that we love you, and that we are more in awe and overwhelmed with your presence than we are of anything that we are facing right now. So God, when things of worry and fear start to trickle in and begin to throw us off balance and become the boss, God, can we remember that promise of who you are and who we belong to? We thank you for this time.